All right, Miss Sydney, go ahead.
Hey everyone. Okay, so I'm hoping this is gonna be like half interactive, okay? um, so tonight I'm going to talk about God's promises and use the book of Joshua and some different passages throughout that book to talk about it. So if you do have Bibles, go ahead and open up to somewhere in Joshua. We'll kind of jump around and I'll let you know where we are as we're going. But first, we're going to do like a show of hands thing, okay? So, who has ever had somebody break a promise to them? Okay, yeah, most people. Have you ever broken a promise yourself? Yeah. And this is your turn to talk now for a second. How does it feel to be let down or to let someone else down? We have thumbs down. Bad. Yep. And have any of you ever felt like, not that it was, this is what happened, but you felt like God let you down or broke a promise to you? Yeah? Okay, so we're going to talk about all of that. The first verse we're going to look at is Joshua 1:3. It says, "Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses." So at this moment, the Lord is basically retelling his promise to the Israelites, that he is going to give them the promised land as he promised. So God does fulfill all of his promises. And we're going to see a lot more evidence of that throughout the rest of the book. So everyone turn to Joshua 6:25 now. I think I'm reading ESV. I think. I didn't actually write that down, though.
Just wanted to make sure it wasn't, one of the ones from the devil.
Oh, I was going to read the Message remix. Is that okay? Yeah.
No, I just wanted to read the same one.
Okay.
There we go. Where are we at now, Joshua? What?
Joshua 6:25. But Rahab the prostitute and her father's household and all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive. And she has lived in Israel to this day because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. So I love this story. I mean, who's familiar with the story of Rahab and the walls of Jericho? Okay, so everyone knows the story. I love that not only did God save her and her family like they were promised, but then much later on, we find out in Matthew that she's actually grafted into the line of Jesus on top of it. So the Lord not only fulfills his promise, but he also does even better most of the time, which is pretty cool. And then Joshua 1:11, this is the Lord speaking, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. So I like this verse because sometimes when I am thinking about God's promises, I have had moments where I'm just like not doing anything to help it along, and I'm wondering why nothing's happening. Who else has done that before? Anybody? Yeah. But in this case, like the Israelites had to actually prepare for the blessing that they were receiving, right? And so an example that I'm going to use in my own life, and I'll go back to it a couple of times, is my house and how we recently got this house, and it was really amazing. And at the very beginning of the process, I felt like the Lord told me, like, you're definitely getting this house before we even made an offer or anything. And there were a lot of moments where it didn't feel like it, and that's okay. It ended up happening anyways. But if I had just heard the Lord say, hey, you've got this house, and then we did nothing, we just didn't list our house that we were living in, didn't put an offer in on the new house, we never would have gotten it. So sometimes you have to actually do something. You have to actually act in faith on the promises that the Lord has given to you. Does anybody else have an experience about that they wanted to share? I was hoping for this to be interactive, so it'd be really awesome if someone had an experience like that they wanted to talk about. Doug, thank you. saving my life.
This goes back. This goes back to when we first came to Liberty from Regent. Some things, Regent went sideways, and I didn't realize at the time, but I was grieving that. And we were praying and asking God what we should do next and what should happen. And a friend of ours came up to Liberty to be the dean, and he encouraged me to apply. And it was like, before that, I had never, ever, ever, ever thought I'd go to Liberty. But I had to stop thinking that way, and I had to apply, and I had to go through an interview, and I had to go through the whole process of getting hired. Had I not done those steps, it wasn't just handed to me, and then I had to go through what we call the Inquisition. You're brought in with 4 other faculty members that aren't necessarily in your school, who don't know you, and they ask you all kinds of questions, like, where do you stand on the gifts of the Spirit? Knowing that I was coming from Regent, they were kind of harsh about that. Knowing that I was coming from Regent, they said, what do you believe about eschatology? And I had to answer honestly and let God sort it out, whether I answered wrong. If I answered wrong, I could have not been hired. But if God wanted me to have it, I had to answer honestly. Does that play into what you're saying?
Absolutely. Like, you had to do all of these different steps in order to get the job that you believe the Lord told you were going to get, and be honest along the way, even in moments where it didn't feel like it was going to work out, but it did anyways, because it was God's promise. I also love that you brought up Liberty, because it reminds me of my favorite Jerry Falwell quote, which is, I think he says, work like it all depends on you, and pray like it all depends on God. So that totally plays into this. He did. Yeah.
That's a good one.
That's why it's my favorite. So yeah. All right.
Did you want more stories, or
We can totally do more stories if you guys have them.
like I didn't know how much of your night was dependent on us getting into those topics?
Like, at least if 1 or 2 people could talk, that would be really great.
Yeah. Can somebody get Kathy a mic, please?
As far as God saying something and us having to walk through hope and faith to see it happen, it's probably 30 years ago, but it's probably happened before, but this is a big thing that stands out. We were in the process of marriage counseling, and Ken wasn't really taken to it that well, and I just remember, kind of losing hope and just calling some friends to pray with, and I heard the Lord speak when I was by myself with him. I will take him forever to return it. I will take him for a little while to return him forever. And I'm like, take him? It kind of scared me. What do you mean? But the process of the healing was really ugly for a while. It looked like he wasn't going to, he stopped going to church, and almost an atheist. He turned so angry toward God, but that was part of the healing. So I had to hold on and think, God's got this. He's going to turn it around. So kept holding on, and now, it's just amazing. I'm amazed over and over, like, what you have done, God. It's amazing. So it's good to wait.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thanks, Kathy. All right. So the next verse we're going to look at is Joshua 18:3, which says, "So Joshua said to the people of Israel, 'How long will you put off going in to take possession of the land which the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you?'" So similar theme on this one. Sometimes the blessings that the Lord has given to us, like the fulfillment of the promise, it's really just right there. We just have to go get it, right? And so I do think it's cool how we can have a role in the fulfillment of God's promises, because he doesn't actually need us to to like do anything to make, you know, his will happen. But we are still like invited in to be a part of that and to play a part in the promises in our own lives and the lives of others coming to fruition. So that's pretty cool. All right, we're kind of switching topics a little bit, but not really, because it's still about God's promises. So Joshua 21, 1 through 3. Then the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites came to Eleazar the priest and to Joshua the son of Nun and to the heads of the fathers' houses of the tribes of the people of Israel. And they said to them at Shiloh in the land of Canaan, the Lord commanded through Moses that we be given cities to dwell in, along with their pasture lands for our livestock. So by command of the Lord, the people of Israel gave to the Levites the following cities and pasture lands out of their inheritance. And to spare you, I'm not going to read all of those because that's a lot. But it is really cool that I like this passage a lot, and the point I'm going to make is that your life might not look like someone else's. Like the Levites had a very different kind of inheritance than the rest of the tribes of Israel, but God still fulfilled his promise to them. They still got a piece of land in each tribe's territory. And so I think that was really cool. Like, just because, you know, you may not have all the things that you see someone else has, God is still going to fulfill his promises to you, and he's going to take care of all of your needs. And so I like that a lot. All right, the next verse is Joshua 5:12. And the manna ceased the day after they ate of the produce of the land. And there was no longer manna for the people of Israel, but they ate of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. So God took away the manna, which to some of them may not have seemed like a good thing, right? Because it was this great thing that they were getting every day from the Lord. But he replaced it with something so much better, which was eating of their own promised land and the fruit of the land. And so sometimes the Lord can do that in our own lives too. He'll take away something that we feel like is really good, and maybe it is, but then he replaces it with something that's even better. And so this is a point where I would love to pause and talk about that. I'll bring up my house again. I loved my house, my old house, so much. I really, really loved it. I actually cried when we locked the door for the last time and left it, and that was it. I was pretty sad leaving our house. But our new house is I've described it to people. I'm like, it's a lot like our old house, but better in every way, and I actually mean that. And just where we live is so much better, and the house is great, and it's just a really good life for us. So it was really hard to let go of that thing that I loved and that was good to me, but the Lord replaced it with something a lot better. So does anyone else have examples of things in your life where the Lord took something and replaced it with something even better?
The one night I didn't tell everybody to sit in the middle, and y'all just went everywhere.
I drove for 16 years. I drove a Toyota 4Runner. It was red and sassy, and it was just the perfect car, and I really did love it. So we can speak to idolatry later, because I love that car. But what we did when we decided we weren't going to keep it any longer is we gave it, with a little bit of money, we gave it to one of our sons. And I would look at that car on the road. I see other people driving similar things and all that kind of stuff. And when we went to replace it, I tried to buy another 4Runner. And I took a brand new 4Runner home and couldn't park it in our garage. They had made it more like a Sequoia, not like a 4Runner. It was too big. We couldn't fit it in the garage. So I had to take it back. And the end of the story is, and the part that's the best part is, when we got to where we really needed another car because of work and so forth, we went to the Terry dealership in town, and we thought we were going to we thought we'd get a decent price on a certain car. We were wrong. It was just not even within our price range. But the guy said, well, you think about something used? And we said, well, yeah, sure, if it's the right thing. The car that we're driving now, an elderly couple had turned it in with 14,000 miles on it. They were going from 2 cars to 1 because of some issues with their health. And that car, we were able, just in the circumstances, able to pay cash for that car. And I'm driving it now, and it does all the things my 4Runner did. It's not bright red, but it's working just fine. And the point is, our 4Runner blessed our son. We now have a car that does everything we needed to do, and the Lord did it within a price range we could afford.
That's awesome. I'd also like to point out for people not here that Pam talked about the car being bright red, and she's now wearing bright red. So she really did love that about the car.
Yes, and red lipstick.
Yeah. Anybody else? Phil.
This might seem like somewhat of a stretch, but I feel like the Lord's telling me to share. But there was a period of time when I moved here back in 2015 where I was basically living in my grandparents' basement because I had nothing better to do, and I didn't know what else was happening. And first time I'd ever done that, there were some significant relational issues involved with that. And at one point, the Lord very much clearly told me that there's a significant portion of it that was my fault. And I was very mad about that because there's some things that were very clearly their fault. And the Lord said very clearly, I don't care what's their fault. You have to deal with what's your fault. And to me, it had become very much a justice thing. But how dare I give this up because it's the just thing to do given what they're doing to me, even though I'm living in their basement. It was, I was in the fault. But a long story short, basically, I unequivocally went up to them and apologized and handed all of things over to them. And like overnight, things just changed for the better in ways that I can't even describe that are still carrying today, 10 years later. So, yeah, get rid of that.
I love that because it also reminds me of how, like, a lot of times we'll be, like, struggling and there feels like there's tension, like, with the Lord, right, in our relationship there. And then if we just, like, let it go and, like, give it to him, then all of a sudden things start getting a lot better. So, real world example of that. Cool. Anybody else want to share before we move on? Jared, okay.
So I didn't, at the time, I didn't think of this as being a promise of God. In fact, I think I need to like rework my thinking on that entire terminology. But I was working at PetSmart, and I had been working there since I was in college. And then Heidi and I got married, and we moved to Lynchburg. I didn't know anybody or anything here, so I was like, what if I just call the store? And it just so happened that Heidi used to work at that store and knew the manager, and it was a pretty easy slot in to get me a job there. And for like a year and a half, I really didn't like my job. I enjoyed what I did, but there were parts of it that I just couldn't reconcile. And but I was like, you know what? We're buying a house. Heidi's pregnant. I'm going to stick it out. Like it felt like a really bad time to leave. And then I got laid off. PetSmart got bought out by another company, and God was like, it's time to go. Like, I've been telling you to leave. If you won't leave, you will leave. So I ended up leaving, and I just took the path of least resistance and started working at Liberty because they're always hiring. So I got a job there, and I worked something else that I probably shouldn't have, and then it really felt like I kept just going and taking the easy path. When I was in school, I went to college to become an educator, so I was like, well, if Liberty isn't working out, I'm going to go do that. So I went and taught for 5 years, which was the worst. Mostly because of a personality thing. It just wasn't a great fit for me. And then, it just, long story short, it was just like a series of events that kind of like brought me to where I'm in a place now where I'm happy with what I'm doing, and I'm content, and I'm also like able to reflect on everything else. And I was like, this was a promise of God to get me to a place where I could provide for my family and enjoy it. Like, I didn't have to do something that I didn't enjoy or that my heart wasn't in, that ultimately damaged a part of what God made me to do because I was forcing a square peg into a round hole. And I forget what your exact question was, but at some point At some point, I was thinking that what I was saying meant that I thought it was similar enough to share.
No, it is similar. Basically, I said, has that God ever taken something good from your life and replaced it with something better?
Yeah.
So
All the jobs.
Yeah, all the jobs.
All the jobs.
Question, so you're saying the job you have now is the one you like?
Oh, I love it.
Love it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like growing up, I was surrounded by people that would just work to death doing things they hated.
Yeah.
Like just everybody I knew, it was just what they did. It was like, oh, we work all day and then talk about how much we hate our job all night.
Yeah, that's
Like
how we
that's
bond.
very common.
Yeah.
Turns out, and so growing up, I was just like, oh, that's what you do. You just do something you hate all day so that you can feed your family. And then, which my dad was a pastor, he did not talk like that. I just want to make that really clear because I think enough of you realize that, like, yeah, it wasn't him, but just a lot of people that I was surrounded by were just like, oh, I farm because my daddy farmed. You know, they hate it, but it's the only way they knew how to make money.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when I realized that that's not life. Like, life is not just doing something because it's what you know until, you know, you just hate everybody and everything, which is what was happening when I was teaching. Like, I had gotten to the point where I didn't like people anymore.
Yeah, I got a couple follow-up questions,
Yeah.
though. Did you meet TJ at Liberty?
I did not.
Oh, how do you know TJ? Just quick answer.
That's,
Yeah.
we
Just non-Liberty related. Never mind.
yeah, we met through Heidi and Amy.
Heidi and Amy.
Through
Okay.
a co-op, yeah.
Through co-op. Sorry. But then, so I was going to use the TJ point, but we'll scratch that one. But then
Well, I met you guys through teaching.
Yeah, I was getting there.
Yeah. Oh,
Teaching.
Sorry, skipped a step.
So teaching, when his principal he worked for went to the Ramp Church, where for those of you who don't know, the first place we rented was on the Ramp Church property in the back of the parking lot. And so the Ramp Church was having this big event, and the principal of his school went there and had asked Jared to come bring all his reptilian friends. And if you haven't noticed, my kids love reptiles and snakes, so we beelined across the parking lot to this weird bearded man with snakes and turtles, and that's where we hung out for the whole day. And I really liked Jared, and I think Heidi was there, and it was really fun connection. And then, but then Jared couldn't find us after that. Like, I guess there was a lot going on. We had told him, but it was easy to forget the information. And then they couldn't find us, so then TJ and Amy told them about, like, they were looking for us for a long time from the story I remember, and then TJ and Amy were like, you should come to our church. Like, I think that's the church. So, but my point of all that is, in one hand, it would be easy to say it would have been nice if Jared just started this handyman business when he got out of college and got married, but sometimes it's a lot of important steps in life that maybe have nothing to do with what you're going to ultimately love doing, but they have to do with the other things in life that you enjoy and love. You know what I mean? Like, I did a lot of things before this, what I'm doing now, and they arguably have nothing to do with what I'm doing now, but that's not true. They have everything to do with it. Like, everything in life connects. And so as you're marching towards a promised land, this promise of God, like, it's okay if there's a little delay. It's okay but if God has to stretch you and grow you to get there, because once you get there, you have to work and sustain it. Like, that's our point, was that God fed them manna in the wilderness, but then it stopped and they had to feed themselves in the promise. So, like, the journey that Jarrett was describing is actually very important for his life. On the microscopic view of finances, he would have been better off not to skip all that. But in everything else, it's probably pretty good. At least by my assessment. Jared could be like, no, it was awful.
No, I agree. And part of, I wouldn't have, if I had tried to do something like that before I met the people at the church, I would have been very unsuccessful. Just from, like, a connection standpoint. Well, that, and, like, I wouldn't, like, I sat down with you and Mark, like, day one after I quit my job, and I was like, what's next, Matt? And if I hadn't had you and Mark and Josh to, like, help me figure out what to do, I would have been back at teaching or something else within like 5 months. It wouldn't have worked out. So without knowing the people and having the experiences that I had before all of that, it wouldn't have worked. Because I've given it quite a lot of thought, and because I don't like to think that I've wasted time. I don't want to like have regrets either, but like it really was perfect timing.
Fun story. I did meet TJ working at Liberty. We were in the same department. And without that, I wouldn't have met Amy, who introduced me to Jared and Heidi, and that's why I decided to come to Dayspring. So,
Well, I knew that a bunch of
Yeah.
y'all met at Liberty, and that's why I thought it was going to be like, oh, I got this whole thing for Jared's life.
it's just for Sydney's life. It's fine. All right. So the next passage we're going to look at is Joshua 7, 1 through 9. I won't read the whole thing 'cause it's a little bit longer. But this is the one where it says, the people of Israel broke faith in regard to the devoted things. So the people of Israel had started sinning, and then they had to battle these people from Ai, or Ai if you're Matt, but I don't think that's how you're supposed to pronounce it. No, I think it's IE. And so then they went into battle. Essentially, things didn't go well. They lost the battle. Joshua cries out, and he's like really upset. Why is this happening? I thought you brought us here because this is the promised land. And you can read the whole passage to get more details if you want to. But basically, my point here is that sometimes we as people make mistakes. And when that happens, there can be setbacks in God's ultimate plan and in like the particular promises that he has for your life. But it doesn't mean the Lord is not keeping his promise. It just means that there's a setback, and that's hard. And sometimes even the most faithful, like in this case Joshua, cry out to the Lord asking why. And so it's okay to ask why and cry out to the Lord. That's really what you should do, is go to him even when it's hard or when it's good. But the point is that the Lord is still going to hold up his end of the bargain, even if we're not. It might just take a little bit longer because we're doing some things we ought not to be. And then I believe the next one is related. Let me double check. Oh, yeah. Okay. So the next passage I want you guys to look at is Joshua 14, 6 through 5. So does everyone know the story about the scouts that went into the promised land to check it out? Only 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, came back with a good report, and everyone else was like, this is terrible. There's giants. They're going to kill us. It's awful. We can't go in there. Well, because of that, the Lord had promised Caleb something special when he got into the promised land. And it took 45 years for that promise to happen, all right? It was a whole nother 45 years before Caleb had that special promise fulfilled to him by the Lord. And that's a really long time. A lot of us in here aren't even 45 years old, so it's like longer than our lives. But the point is that it still happened. So that's just kind of related to the last one, where yes, there can be setbacks sometimes. In Caleb's case, I don't even think it was his fault that there was a setback, right? He didn't do anything wrong. It was the people around him who were making mistakes and causing that delay in the Israelites entering the promised land. But he was still faithful, and he still had the Lord's promise fulfilled to him, which I think is pretty cool. That's another place I'd like to pause for half a second and just, anyone have a promise that took so much longer to be fulfilled than you expected it to, but it did ultimately happen? Oh, we've got Phil and Joylanda. Phil raised his hand first. So,
I've got a mic, sorry.
Okay.
So one thing is actually the really cool thing about part of the promise for Caleb is that one of the things he says, he's like 85 or 90 years old, and he's like, hey, I still have the strength and vigor that I had 45 years ago, so I can still go take on these guys as if it was 45 years ago. So God sustained him physically for those extra 40 years. That's really cool.
Yes, God gives us what we need.
Yes. And then my story is just marriage. So I went through a lot of misfires trying to find the right woman, and finally gave up when it's all said and done. And literally, so at 27 years old, I happened to look down one day at a girl that I've been going to church with for 5 years, Allie, and noticed she was wearing cowboy boots. And literally, like, it was weird. I pretty much knew from the time that I asked her if she wanted to go dancing that she was going to be my wife from that moment forward. And it was one of the easiest decisions I've ever made. It was just amazing how effortless and easy it was and how much time I could have not wasted going through all those other girls. Yeah, it took a while.
Well, we all think she's pretty awesome too. So we're glad you ended up with Allie. Joylanda.
Hello, hello, hello. All right. So I also have a Liberty job story. I started out in the call center, which was not great. And just the environment took a toll on me. And so I was applying for different jobs and different positions and literally just applying like crazy. And there was one specifically where a coworker had got it accepted into. Like, she was making the transition, and she's like, it's awesome over there. There's other positions you should apply. And the Lord told me not to apply. And I was like, Jesus, you obviously don't know how awful this position is. I'm going to do it anyway. And he told me not to apply because he had something better. But I applied for it, and literally, like, that same day I got denied. I was like, how does that even happen? I just turned in my application. And so fast forward about a month or maybe a couple weeks, another coworker was telling me, like, oh, there's this awesome position in the registrar's office. It doesn't open up a lot because it's so awesome. It happened to open up. He knew 2 of the hiring managers. I applied. I got an interview, and then nothing happened. But then the Lord told me like a week later after the interview that he was going to give it to me. And that evening, I got an email saying that I got the job. And then, like, radio silence for like over a month. And the manager was like, you know, HR has to do the thing. And I was like, okay, cool. But then so much time went by that other people started doubting. And they were like, oh, we thought you got the job. Maybe you should apply for this. Maybe you should apply for that. And I had to not only hold on to the hope and truth that the Lord had told me that he was going to bless me with this position, but I also had to learn how to have joy in the middle of waiting for it. And so I did eventually end up making the move. It was like 1 or 2 months after they said I could start, but I am now still currently thriving and living my best life in that job.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Like having hopeful anticipation for the promises of the Lord instead of like worry and anxiety over whether or not it's going to happen. Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks, Jorlanda. And I'll talk about my house again for a second.
Enough with the house. No, I'm just
What?
kidding. Enough with the house. No, I'm just
Oh, okay.
I was just kidding.
Sorry.
Just kidding.
It's just different facets of this cool promise, okay? Sorry if that's
No,
not
it's funny you
interesting
said
to
earlier that it's like your other house but better. I'm like, it really is just like her other house
But
in
better
all
in
the
every
weird
way.
ways, but it better.
Yep, exactly. So it was like just the beginning of December, like last year, that we were like, okay, we're gonna do this, and I thought I'd heard the Lord say, yes, this is your house, and then it took 5 months for it to actually happen. We had to sell our old house. It was a contingency offer in order to actually buy the new house. And it took a really long time to sell the old house. I was really frustrated because we listed our house like in the middle of December or something. And I was like, this is great. The Lord promised it. We're going to get an offer on our house like by Christmas. And it's just going to be like super exciting to have this last Christmas in our house with and we've got everything going on our new house and it's going to be wonderful. Christmas comes and goes. We do not have an offer on our house. And I'm like, is it even going to happen? And then the months go by and there's like always a moment, like sometimes it was like every hour, but usually it was like every like week I would have a moment like, I don't think this is going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to do. But obviously that's not what happened. Like the Lord fulfilled his promise because that's what he does, even if we don't have the faith in every single moment. So the Lord is good, and even if it takes longer than our human timeline and what we think it should be, it's still going to happen.
Can I tell a story?
Yes.
When we lived here in town for a long time, and I lived here for 13 years maybe, and then when the Lord put on my heart about going to ministry stuff, I felt like I saw this vision of moving out in the country, which is where my heart belonged anyway. And then we started looking for land, and everything we looked at was so expensive and even the expensive stuff didn't really like excite us. And then this guy we knew, we were at this event, and somebody said, "Oh, he's selling his land," and I asked him. I had kind of remembered what it was like, which is the land we live on now, and I remember thinking it was neat. And I was like, "How much do you want for it?" And he told me, I misunderstood the number. He said the per acre price. I thought that was the total price. You know what I mean? Like he said 56. I thought he said meant 56,000. And I was like, sweet, my budget was 50,000 for land. And we go and look at it, and the Lord just, I mean, it just, our hearts soar. You know what I mean? It might not be your cup of tea, but it is every cup of tea we ever wanted. You know what I mean? We covered every inch of it, me and Kirsten, and we just dreamed, and we fell in love. And then called him up, so excited, and I found out, no, I misunderstood the price. He wanted twice the amount. And I was like, there's no way I can pay that. So I said, let me pray about it. This guy's not like real Christian, he's not a real believer guy, you know what I mean? So I was like, just, can you give me a little bit to pray about it? He's like, sure. Prayed about it. The Lord said, you can pay, he said, you will pay 69,000, which is more than I wanted to pay. And I'm like, I don't want to pay that much. And the Lord was like, you'll be okay. And 69. I was like, I called the guy up and told him 69, and he said, man, I wish I could sell it to you for that much. I owe more than that on it. It's impossible. I'd lose money to sell it. I was like, well, if anything changes, let me know. And then he said, well, it's not, and then hung up. We had to kind of move on. We looked at multiple pieces of land. That guy's name was Chad. And so for the next couple of years, everything we looked at, we said, yeah, but it's not Chad's land. And so we just kept on. And then we even contemplated, let's just track Chad down. Let's just pay the full amount. We'll figure out how to come up with extra money. And I prayed about it, and the Lord said, well, you can if you want to. I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound like a real encouragement from the Lord, does it? And then, so we kind of had to let it die. Like the vision died in our heart, and we were just like, God will provide. And then I ran into Chad, and yeah, I called him I hadn't seen him in years. I called him to come do a job for me where I worked. And anyway, I was like, hey, man, what'd you ever do with that land? And he was like, well, the divorce got ugly. That's why he was selling it. And we couldn't sell it, so I let it go back to the people we bought it from, who we were doing the financing through. And I was like, oh, what are they doing with it? He was like, none of my business. I was like, cool. So I spent the rest of that workday tracking down who owned it and called them up. And I said, hey, how much you want for that land? They said, 69,000. And so we executed that plan. And then the Lord told me like to do the math. And I did the math. And if we had called them up and just paid the full amount when we said, let's just pay it and figure out how to pay for it later, we would have, our total plan of being debt-free wouldn't have worked. But we would have owed like so much money because of the interest compounding and all that stuff. Like we'd still be paying on it. You know what I mean? Like it would have made, not still, but you know what I'm saying. You get the idea. And so like that couple years of patience saved us, $40,000. And when you're trying to buy land and build a house with no loan, like every $10,000 counts. You know what I'm saying? Like didn't have that much money. That's why I whittled a house out of sticks. But anyway, yeah, just the Lord has done some wild things of just trusting, you know what I mean? I won't tell the whole story, but one time when I was young, I hated my job, and like Jared, and I prayed to the Lord. I worked at BWXT, the nuclear plant up here, night shift. I hated everything about it, but they do make a lot of money there. And I was like, God, I am so miserable. I'm thankful for my job. I am so miserable. This feels like a futile life. Could you give me a job where I make a difference, please? And the Lord spoke to me and told me to go to work for a company that had just went bankrupt and laid literally everyone off. And I was like, okay, that's all right then. And I went, and they were like, we got about a week's worth of work. If you want to come do it after that, don't know. And I was like, well, God said to do it, so all right. I quit my job, my best job, and went to work for the bankrupt company. And it was the beginning of making me a leader and not just a minion in the, a cog in the wheel. You know what I mean? Like, I'd have been a cog in the wheel of B&W for the rest of my life. But taking that chance, because guess what happens when you go to be the first employee back after everyone's laid off? You're now the head of engineering, the head of maintenance, the head of design. You're the head of, you're the head of every department. Yeah, anyway, God has funny ways of doing it.
That's awesome. Thank you, everyone, for sharing those stories. Those were all really cool. Okay, next passage I want to check out, Joshua 17, 3 and 4. Now, Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, had no sons, but only daughters, and these are the names of his daughters, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They approached Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the leaders and said, "The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance along with our brothers. So according to the mouth of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among the brothers of their father." The full story is in Numbers, I think. Does that sound right to everybody? Yeah, I think it's in Numbers. But so if you want to read it, please do that. I love this story. But the reason I wanted to bring this one up is because they had already received the confirmation from the Lord and from Moses that they would receive an inheritance. And then this was just going back and confirming, yes, you ladies are getting the inheritance that you had been promised. And I wanted to bring this one up because God's promises supersede the culture around us, right? So in this case, obviously, they live in a very patriarchal society where things get passed from man to man. They don't get passed to women. Like, that's just not a thing. But God doesn't work like that. He values all of us, and the culture, it doesn't matter what the culture is. If God said it's going to happen, it's going to happen. So I love that whole story, really, is pretty awesome. And even if the circumstances around you, the culture around you, the society, whatever, looks like it's just flying in the face of whatever the promise is that the Lord has given you, don't worry about it, because if God said it, it'll happen, no matter what's going on everywhere else. And then Joshua 17, 14 through 18, so just a little bit later in this this chapter. I will go ahead and read this one. Then the people of Joseph spoke to Joshua, saying, "Why have you given me but one lot and one portion as an inheritance, although I am a numerous people, since all along the Lord has blessed me?" And Joshua said to them, "If you are a numerous people, go up by yourselves to the forest, and there clear ground for yourselves in the land of the Perizzites and the Rephaim, since the hill country of Ephraim is too narrow for you." The people of Joseph said, "The hill country is not enough for us, yet all the Canaanites who dwell in the plain have chariots of iron, both those in Beth-shean and its villages, and those in the valley of Jezreel." Then Joshua said to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, "You are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one allotment only, but the hill country shall be yours. For though it is a forest, you shall clear it and possess it to its farthest borders. For you shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have chariots of iron and though they are strong." I wanted to bring this one up because it's kind of similar to the one about culture and things looking like they aren't going to work out. When the odds are stacked against us, if the Lord said it, it's still going to happen. So the people of Joseph were looking at this land that Joshua told them to invade, and they're like, "We can't beat these people. They're like, there's way more than us. They have better equipment. Like, there's just no way we're going to beat these people." But the answer is actually yes. If it's meant to be yours, if God promised it to you, then it's going to be yours. Like, it doesn't matter if it looks like it's not going to be yours, like in Matt's story that he talked about, how the land was like too much money and it just wasn't working out. But the Lord said, "No, you're going to get it, and it's actually going to be for this amount, and it's going to be awesome." And it is awesome now. So that is a really cool story, I think. And also, I loved that these people are like just complaining too. Like, we also complain. I complain a lot, even when I'm like, the Lord promised me something. I'm like, but God, it's not happening the way I wanted it to, or like as fast as I wanted it to, or like whatever. Or I'll complain to anyone who will listen sometimes. I try not to, but every once in a while it happens. And so they were complaining and things weren't looking good for them, but God was like, no, I promised it to you, so it's still gonna happen, even though you don't have a good attitude and it doesn't look good, it's still gonna happen. Next passage that I want to talk about, we're going to flip back a little bit. Joshua 10, 12 through 14. This is the story where I'll just read just a little bit of it. Sun stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. God will go to great lengths to make sure his promises are fulfilled to us, like literally stopping the sun and moon, okay? He will stop outer space for us, which I think is pretty amazing. And I want to pause there for a second, too. Does anyone have any stories where it was just like, whoa, it looked like this was not going to happen, and it just miraculously, God made it happen anyways? Joylanda.
I have a story. So I went on this. I went to this writers' conference last March sometime, and money was definitely tight at the time. And so I show up. It's out in Michigan. I show up at the hotel, and she's like, "Oh, you haven't paid for this?" And I was like, "What? I definitely have." And she's like, "Nope, it hasn't come out yet." And so I was thinking I had more money than I did. And then they were trying to charge me a bunch of like security fees, and I was like, listen, this is not gonna work. And so she sorted it all out, the money came out, but like the whole week, it was in the back of my mind, like, I'm gonna run out of money. I'm in a city where I don't have my own transportation, like I'm having to, rely on Lyft and, Uber and this, that, and the other. And the Lord just told me that he was gonna take care of it. And so, like, I think it was, like, the next to last day, I'm, like, down to my last pennies, and I'm, like, don't know how I'm getting to the airport. And I checked my account, and, like, all the money is back in my account that the lady had charged when I first checked into the hotel. And I was like, that seems interesting. And I was, like, kind of hesitant to touch it because I was like, it's not supposed to be there, Jesus. But he's like, don't worry about it. And so I go to check out of the hotel, and I turn in my key, and I'm fully expecting them to be like, oh, something's weird. We have to run your card again. And she's like, everything looks good. And, like, I started to say something, but the Lord was like, nope, just stay quiet. And I was like, okay, bye. And so I was able to, like, get back to Virginia, and then a couple, like maybe even a week later, like the money did come out again, but by that time I was like squared away financially. But it was one of those things where it was like, this should not be happening, like, but it is. And God's saying it's fine. Because for me, I was like, I don't want to be dishonest. He's like, I'm taking care of you. Be quiet. Stop trying to mess things up. And I'm trying to provide for you.
Yeah, I love that story. When we were buying our house, we got, first of all, a much longer period to sell our old house than we were supposed to. But then we ran out of time. And we were like, oh, this is it. We're not getting the house. But then the guy who was selling the house was just like, yeah, we'll just renew it for the same amount of time. And then we were like, what? So it was pretty amazing. There were other moments like that too, but we were like, there were so many times where we were like, yeah, it's just not happening. Like, there's just no way it's gonna work out anymore. But then suddenly something crazy happened, and we're like, wow, we were not expecting that at all. So yeah, the Lord is good. Yes, ma'am. Oh, one more person. Yes. Oh, two. Oh, there's a bunch of people. So many people are excited. Guys, it is 6:59, so just want to say that out loud. But Mia, I saw you first.
Okay. So Psalm 46 says, he makes the wars to cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. So I'll make it really fast. So for years, I went through some really nasty custody battles and a really nasty divorce. And Andrew and I, so in the meantime, I'd remarried. We'd had, multiple kids. And we really felt that our Heavenly Father had impressed upon us that, things were going to get better, but it just seemed like things just kept getting worse and worse. And so the very last time we go to court, this was about 2 years ago now, Andrew was praying this verse. We're over at the court, and I am inside, and he's outside of the courthouse praying this verse over just, what's going on. He doesn't know what's going on. And truly, like, on that day, just things completely stopped. And it's been 2 years, and, there's been like 1 or 2 little blips of, some things. But for the most part, things truly just stopped on that day. So that was just really cool to see where, here was this verse that we had been praying, and it, our Heavenly Father, He really caused this war to completely stop and cease. So.
Okay, so I lived in Utah. I'll do this quick. Okay, so we lived in Utah, and Brian lived there his entire life. Like, he lived in the same house. He loved Utah. All of his family was there, but I was miserable, and I wanted to get out and wanted to come to Virginia, and there was no way he was going to leave Utah. And I actually applied for a job for him because he said, I won't move unless you have a job. And he was offered the job, and they said that they would let him. And he's like, I don't know. I still don't know if I want to go. And he prayed about it, and there was just something at church. There was a scripture that triggered him, and I saw him at the end of church, and he was in tears, and he's like, we're going to Virginia. And I was like, yes. So it was really cool that we're here, and it's been a huge blessing since.
There were a couple other hands. Anyone else wanted to share? Doug. Okay.
There's so many stories, but I'll tell one quickly. We went from 2 staff positions to no staff positions. We went from 1 kid to 2 kids, all in a period of about 6 months. And a big job came along, kind of through a whole God deal, and I got offered a film, and it was going to air on PBS, and it was with a filmmaker up in Northern Virginia. And I went up and interviewed and talked to him and showed him my reel, and he hired me. And I came back home, and a couple days later, he called me up and fired me. And I was like, God, this is... And his whole reason for firing me was that I lived too far away from him. And he was having nightmares because he couldn't get in touch with me. And Pam and I prayed, we talked.
We were both very sick with the flu. We cried, God, we need this.
And God said, just be pleasant to him. Don't fight with him. Just be pleasant with him. Agree with him. Just talk to him nicely. And then at the end of the phone call, he said, okay, don't take any other jobs yet. Let me think about this for a couple days. I'm like, you just fired me, and now you're saying don't take any other jobs. He called me back 24 hours later and said, okay, listen, I want to hire you. But I need you to talk to me on the phone every week before we get into the project, and I need you to come up a couple more times before we get into the project. Of course, I'll pay you for all of that. And I was like, sure, I can do that. And I ended up doing 2 films with him. They aired on PBS nationally. It turned out to be a really wonderful thing. But for that moment on the phone and that 24 hours, it looked like it was gone.
Poor guy had some fear, but the Lord took care of it for you. Yeah.
And so texting and Zoom and all those things they weren't even a possibility. It was relying on a phone call.
All right. Any final thoughts before close?
You better wrap it up. Sis.
Okay, I'm wrapping it up. Last verse I want to share with you guys. Joshua 21:45. Not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All had come to pass. So that's what I love. Every promise God made to the Israelites that came to pass, and the same thing is true for all of us. The people sinned, there were delays and different things like that, but the Lord will always deliver, even if it doesn't look like it. And that's it. And I'll just pray for us, and then we can go. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Dear Jesus, thank you so much just for who you are, for being the Lord of our lives, and for being a promise keeper. God, help us to have the faith while we're waiting on the fruition of those promises. Help us to stay in joy and peace and wisdom during those times. And we love you, Lord. Thank you so much for everything. In your name, amen.
Amen. Yay. Sydney, what was that verse, that last verse? Not one word, what?
Not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All came to pass.
Amen. That can be our new mantra. We'll shorten it to not one word. So when someone starts complaining, we can remind them, not one word. It'll encourage them in the words of the Lord.